everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today in our session, Enhancing Resiliency and Agility with SAP Solution Extensions by Blackline. My name is Jess McKeon. I am a Senior Solutions Marketing Manager here at Blackline, and I'm joined today by Molly Boyle and Catherine Beecraft, also of Blackline. Before I throw it over to our speakers, today's agenda will be focusing on business and finance transformation trends, building resilience and agility with SAP and Blackline, and benefits and impactful results. So thank you so much to our speakers today joining us, and I will hand it over to Molly Boyle.
Thanks, Jess, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Looking forward to a great discussion and very pleased to be here to share some insights and some ideas. As Jess said, my name is Molly Boyle. I lead our finance transformation and solutions group here at Blackline. What that really means is I spend most of my time working with our customers, primarily those customers who run SAP as their primary ERP, focusing on identifying opportunities for optimization and helping them understand some of the top use cases for using our solutions in the context of an SAP environment. I've been here for about 5 years now in that role, working with those customers, so I've had lots of different experiences and seen customers at various parts of their transformation journey. But before joining Blackline, I actually went through that very process myself. I was a customer of both SAP and Blackline, had a chance to work through a large ERP transformation project, as well as roll out several of the SAP solution extensions by Blackline that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the session today. So very glad to be here. Happy to answer your questions in the Q&A if you have them. And looking forward to you meeting my colleague, Catherine. So Catherine, I'll toss it over to you.
Thanks, Molly. So I'm Catherine Beecraft. I am a Senior Manager of Solutions Strategy and Marketing here with Blackline. Similar to Molly, I am primarily focused on helping our customers who run SAP understand top use cases and how to get the most out of Blackline solutions in an SAP environment. Prior to joining Blackline, I also worked in various accounting roles, including public accounting at PwC and corporate accounting, and also financial reporting and technical accounting at a large retailer. So I, similar to Molly, have had a lot of experience from an end user perspective and really been, in the trenches as many of you have been in your career with accounting and finance. So let's get started with today's session. And we're going to first talk about business and finance transformation trends and really what's driving the importance of modern financial close management solutions and transformation. So I think most of you have probably experienced this, and you know very well that there's a lot of disruption and a lot of uncertainty in the market right now. Finance and accounting teams are really just facing unprecedented and kind of constant challenges and change. Some of the top ones we have highlighted here is really the economic uncertainty. So with rising interest rates and inflation and just ongoing challenges that have continued since the pandemic began and other global issues, there's just a lot of headwinds for finance and accounting teams and really companies as a whole. The other one is talent and labor issues. So many of you know that there's been kind of this great resignation over the past couple of years. And while that may be shifting in the marketplace slightly as organizations are kind of reacting to some of that other economic uncertainty and either restructuring or rethinking what their organization might look like, there's still a really big talent and shortage gap within accounting and finance. And CEOs and CFOs have been noting that these labor and shortage skills are really going to be a top disruptor in the coming years. So these are just really two of kind of the top disruptors that we've seen in the marketplace. But depending on your company or your industry or even your geographic region, I'm sure there are many other disruptors that you and your company have been dealing with. So the rapid pace of change brought on by these current market dynamics has really put a spotlight on communication of business information and data. And according to IDC, financial processes like the financial close have long been areas where effective communication is really difficult, and it's really highly important. If you think about your finance and accounting processes today and how you're communicating across your teams, it's probably largely email, phone calls, chat, whatever system you might use, Slack, Microsoft Teams, and you're communicating this critical information manually through these different systems. And you're having to, if you're have teams in different regions or spread out across the business, you might have to wait between these different touch points to gather information and to communicate effectively. And it's really not just the communication that's manual in accounting and finance. Traditional manual accounting work really continues to place unsustainable demands on finance and accounting resources. In fact, 94% of accounting and IT teams agree that time spent on accounting, compliance, and financial close gets in the way of other strategic work. And so, without automating some of this repetitive manual work that finance and accounting teams are faced with, you're faced with wasted time, right? Like I was saying, as you're working through your manual processes with communication, you have to wait between your status updates to say, hey, this task is done, you can start your dependency. There's wasted time there. There's wasted time with just doing things like manual ticking and tying, high volume transaction reconciliations that just take a really long time. There's a lot of wasted time in the financial close process. And that lack of efficiency really drives a lack of effectiveness, right? There's excess cost associated with all of that time spent doing those manual processes. And as I'm sure many of you are aware, there's unnecessary risk associated with all of this manual work. When processes aren't standardized or centralized, there's a complete lack of visibility to issues or risks that come up during the financial close. And, beyond that, there's just a lack of control over, your control environment and making sure that all of your standard operating procedures and your controls are followed and effective. And all of this also results in employee turnover. Highly skilled finance and accounting professionals are looking to make meaningful contributions. They're not really interested in digging through the details and the weeds and spending their time doing routine manual work. They want to be using their analytical skills and adding and providing value to your organization. So before I go on and talk about kind of what we can do about this and what some of those solutions are in the marketplace, I'd like to ask Molly if there's anything that you would like to add.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Catherine. I'll just share a couple observations. Like I said, I've been working closely with many of our customers who are in various different phases of, either digital transformations or just on many cases, small scale accounting optimization efforts. And one of the things that I think I resoundingly hear if we come back to this theme of today, which is about building agility and resilience, is that, years ago, I think companies in times of disruption like we're experiencing now would sort of hold the line as their strategy, right? Finance and accounting were the first to manage costs by just, throwing bodies, if you will, or brute force, as many folks would say, to manage through the disruption. They would be the first to just kind of take on the extra work and manage through it and hope that, coming out the other side, there would be a new opportunity to address some challenges or manual processes. And what we're seeing now in this current economic situation, and again, just the amount of change that's happening in today's environment, is companies realizing that approach isn't going to work. And that they have to find ways to find these incremental wins. They have to find ways to address some of their most pressing challenges in order to free people up. You mentioned, a need for information and a need for data. And so manual processes, spreadsheets, extra people are not going to get that information where it needs to be quickest. And I think companies are realizing that if they don't build resilience and agility into their processes and into their people, they may not come out the other side of the current disruption that we're experiencing. So I think, we'll talk about that in a more practical way in just a couple minutes, but I think that's the biggest thing. The cost of all of these things, wasted time, risk, turnover, the cost of all of that is significant right now. And I think companies are sort of at their breaking point where they're looking for practical ways to do something about it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Molly. And I think, just to kind of echo on to what you just said is IDC says going forward, we expect an even greater demand for financial applications that connect finance and accounting processes, that standardize critical financial operational workflows, and increase automation. And so I think that's really kind of the solution that we've seen across our customer base, but also just, in the marketplace in general, is that people are recognizing that finance and accounting technology solutions and the digitization of some of that work is really imperative to building, an organization that is not only agile and can quickly adjust to the changing market conditions, but is also resilient and is able to, get through all of those close and controls and compliance work that's really necessary, and to do it in a way that's, addressing some of those common challenges and is really cost effective and value add to the organization. So I'll hand it over to you, Molly, and kind of let you talk the audience through, how do you do that?
Yeah, great. Good segue. And I want to start, we're going to talk mostly in the next handful of minutes about sort of 4 practical approaches or 4 practical options and opportunities for companies to build resilience and agility with these solutions. But before we get into sort of those practical tips and tricks, I want to touch just a bit on sort of the overall approach to addressing some of these manual processes that you highlighted, Catherine. And I think I love this slide. It looks like a sunrise and it's very cheerful. It also reminds me in some cases of sort of a catcher's mitt, if you will. And that's another common way of describing what finance and accounting can bring to an organization. So I'll get to that in just a second. But what we want to talk about here is, as finance and accounting professionals, the work we do, the value we bring to our organization, so much of it provides this critical, important foundation for the rest of the enterprise, for the rest of the organization, right? And so starting with finance and accounting processes, or even if it's not the very first thing you're doing in a transformation, addressing finance and accounting processes and establishing a strong foundation of reliable, consistent data, and specifically reliable, consistent, actual results that, to your point, Catherine, can be produced on a more real-time basis so that we're not waiting until a specific day after quarter end or after month end to be able to share information with our business partners or to be able to inform important business decisions. One of the CFOs and leaders that I've worked with extensively in my career constantly states, that the controllership is really the cornerstone, or controllership is the catcher's mitt of the organization. And I think that's really what you're seeing here on this slide. You're seeing the foundation of all these broader enterprise capabilities of things like predictive analytics and insights. The foundation and the information that feeds all of that is really what we in finance and accounting deliver. And it's really what comes out of all of these closed processes. And so in some ways, it's a bit ironic that, our actuals, which are the feeder to so many other important processes and business decisions, are one of the most time-consuming, labor-intensive aspects of what we do. And so we see, I think, organizations, and specifically CFOs, chief accounting officers, and other leaders in the finance and accounting organization really kind of getting back to basics during this time of disruption and finding ways to address those critical processes. So again, we're going to talk in just a couple minutes about some practical ways and some observations and share some customer examples of how that's being done. But before we get into that, I'm guessing, many of you that are joining today's call are either, not super familiar or new in your understanding of the relationship between Blackline and SAP and the solutions that we're jointly, bringing to our customers. So I wanted to at least touch briefly on, if we think about sort of those lower 2 arcs in that sunrise there, what are the solutions that help produce those optimized and efficient actual results? And so when we look at SAP's end-to-end offering, this is sort of, you could think about this slide almost as the record to report process. If you're looking at it from left to right, many of you, if not all of you attending today's session, probably are running SAP as your primary ERP. So, right, you run your business on either ECC or S/4HANA or some combination of those, and potentially you may have other ERPs in play, or you're using a central finance approach. those solutions will continue to be sort of the core, right? Your digital core is a term you've probably heard SAP use frequently. That's your system of record. That's where many of your transactions and your supply chain, if you have a supply chain, all of those transactions are occurring there. But on either end, sort of feeding into your ERP and feeding out of your ERP are these important data inputs, and then data that gets consumed on the other side, right? And so if we focus on the left-hand side of your screen there, the integrity of the data that goes into SAP is strengthened and efficiency is added to that process, your financial close process and your intercompany processes, by using these SAP solution extensions by BlackLine. And what that means is that BlackLine is a third-party software company that has a direct partnership with SAP in which our solutions are premium qualified. That means SAP tests and sells these solutions just as they would many of their own software solutions, right? So this is the highest level of partnership, the highest level of software qualification in the SAP partner ecosystem. And in this case, BlackLine brings to SAP's customers two different solution offerings, one specific to the financial close and one specific to the area of intercompany, end-to-end intercompany processes. And really the core value of these solutions is, again, ensuring the integrity of the data that's feeding into your ERP system. That could mean processing manual journal entries. That could mean validating and substantiating ending balances and financial statement accounts. It could mean managing a lot of the transaction reconciliation. Many of you have lots of other sources of financial data besides your SAP system, and you have to reconcile that data across systems. Our solutions will do all of that. And again, these are cloud solutions. I don't think we've actually specifically called that out just yet. So these are cloud solutions that are really complementing, and in this case, extending the value of your SAP ERP. And what you can see, lastly, just to sort of round out this slide, is all of that as you transform and optimize those financial close processes in some of those use cases I called out. That means that the data is getting into SAP, that the data that's already in SAP is validated, substantiated, posted more efficiently and more real time so that you can feed those reporting and analytics processes in a more effective way. And of course, bringing that back to resilience and agility, that gives you the opportunity to inform some of those business decisions and to spend more of your time, if you're a finance and accounting professional, on partnering with the business, supporting ongoing activities rather than focusing on those day in, day out closing activities. So with that, I want to kind of jump in and, Catherine, I'll bring you back into the conversation here. If you have something to add, I'll give you chances to do that. But I want to touch on sort of, as I mentioned, 4 key sort of what I'll refer to as practical ways you can think about building resilience and agility using these solutions and this mindset of establishing a foundation. And the first one here is all about scope, right? One of the most common comments or themes that I hear as I talk to controllers and to their teams is, we don't have any resources. We don't have time. We don't have capacity to take on another implementation right now. Either we're already in the midst of an S/4HANA migration maybe, or another significant project that takes time from IT. We've got all these other competing priorities going on. I think we can all agree, right, that the scope of our roles in finance and accounting continues to expand, yet we're not necessarily getting new resources. And so one of the nice things about these solution extensions is that compared to many other technology projects or implementations, the scope is very manageable. We see our customers deploying and implementing various solutions within the stack that you just saw on that previous slide in often a matter of weeks or a couple of months, finding ways to identify, quick wins or address specific use cases without involving a ton of resources. And as you can see here on this slide, in a business-owned approach. So not taking a ton of time away from your IT resources, not requiring additional, significant outside resources to be able to do these things. This software that BlackLine brings to SAP customers is really purpose-built and has a lot of leading practices that are already established within the solutions. And again, those can be deployed really rapidly. I've seen this time and time again with our customers, working with many different customers and actually deploying these solutions myself. I think my first implementation took about 8 weeks, and I was pretty impressed with that. But we'll share a quick customer example here. Our customer Liberty Group was getting ready to kick off their own S/4HANA migration, and they had an aggressive goal of being able to deploy a couple of these Blackline solutions to be able to give them better visibility, better control around their account substantiation process. And they set a goal of deploying the solutions in 6 weeks, and they did that. They've called out here how easy the solutions are to deploy and understand. And I think, again, that's because these solutions are mature solutions that have been deployed by many, many customers and already have these sort of leading practices built into them. So manageable scope, just to kind of reiterate, is really one of the first, I think, practical things. If you are a finance and accounting leader, or you're working in a finance accounting organization, asking yourself, where do I begin? How do I accomplish something with all of the different pressures going on, and knowing that I'm not getting tremendous amounts of new budget in these tough economic times? Figure out what your couple of most pressing use cases or challenges are in your financial close process, and take a look at how you can deploy solutions like the Blackline solutions, without biting off more than you can chew. Taking on a project that's manageable scope, and then expanding from there as you start to get those wins. So that's one key point. The next one, to some extent, comes back to risk, but also to efficiency. And this is about finding ways to free up those resources, right? Because again, I'm guessing if I did a polling question here, I would ask, how many of you feel like you have enough resources to manage all the work that's being thrown your way? And I can almost guarantee, that most of you would say, no way. We don't have enough people. Our people aren't spending time on the right things. You saw the statistic that Catherine shared at the beginning of the session, saying 94% of finance and accounting and IT professionals said their regular day-to-day work is getting in the way of strategic work. So you've got to focus on capacity. My advice would be to look at your processes, spend a little bit of time evaluating and understanding where those bottlenecks are, start to get visibility to what those bottlenecks look like and where your people are spending your time, and go after those use cases first, right? Maybe it's your payroll accounting processes. Maybe it's your, GRIR or T&E accounting processes. Maybe there are just a couple of, areas within your record to report processes that are taking, just a disproportionate amount of your time and resources. If you go after those first, look for opportunities to take out that manual effort and free up your resources. What you'll find is that creates a tremendous amount of momentum to identify the next use case. And this is something that can be done without a large-scale global project that involves multiple people from every corner of your organization, right? You can do this in digestible ways with manageable scope, like we just talked about, but taking out significant amounts of effort. So that's just another idea, again, a focus on manual effort. And I think that's where, from a risk perspective, a lot of unnecessary risk is introduced, right? When we have manual processes, especially when there's a tremendous amount of volume at a peak time in the month, you've got people ticking and tying data in spreadsheets, manipulating information. All that is doing, besides burning out your people and your talent and keeping them for more important work, is it's introducing unnecessary risk that you can take out of the process. So find those bottlenecks, spend that time up front to really look at where you are today and figure out what the low-hanging fruit looks like. I think that's just a really good momentum creator. So I'm going to share one more customer example, and then I'll pause, Catherine, in case you want to add anything to what I've touched on so far, and we'll continue on. So Finning is another one of our large SAP customers here running SAP and Blackline. And they've been really successful in automating work with Blackline, finding those, as they've stated here, redundant processes, error-prone processes, and not just taking a process and moving it from a spreadsheet into a technology, but also actually transforming the process itself, right? Improving the quality and the accuracy of their financial information. And probably the highlight here of this thought they shared is getting their people focused on analysis and more value added work, more proactive work that can then benefit the business. So just another shining example of, customers that are thinking about this the right way. So I'll pause before we go to our next couple of, practical options. Catherine, any additional thoughts that you wanted to share?
Yeah, thanks for all of that color commentary, Molly. I think the one thing that I just wanted to add is going back to the first kind of practical tip of establishing a manageable scope and limiting dependencies. So, one thing I think that we hear a lot from our customers is that they're supporting other transformation throughout the business. And like in our example, maybe even preparing for a migration to SAP S/4HANA. And I think one of the things that people say is, well, we're going to transform our finance and accounting processes alongside of, or after we support these other business transformation initiatives or alongside of those. And I think, as the market has changed, and some of those projects may have been stalled or pushed out, the need for accounting and finance to transform really hasn't gone away. And so one thing to think about is limiting your dependency on some of those other groups and other organizations, and just really trying to focus on how to drive transformation, build that resiliency and agility within your finance and accounting organization now. And so I think Molly kind of touched on all the practical tips, but I just kind of wanted to give it a little bit of that context. If you're thinking about, well, where does finance and accounting fit in? It's really important for you to, to be able to disseminate information and to enable data-driven decision-making and really build up to that, those advanced enterprise capabilities that Molly showed on that sunrise slide, and enabling those agile, continuous, predictive insights and analytics, right? You need to focus on your accounting and finance transformation. So limiting the dependency, making it a manageable scope, and just focusing on the pieces that you can control within finance and accounting will go a really long way. So I think that's the only thing that I really wanted to add, Molly.
No, that's great. Great commentary. I think, one of the phrases that I've heard a few folks use in describing sort of the early accounting and finance work they've done with the Blackline solutions is they've described it as sort of no regret work. When you think about the sequencing, even if you have other transformation initiatives ongoing, if you have other things on your roadmap that are a priority, the areas like you saw on that solution slide with your SAP ERP in the middle, what you see there is that Blackline is going to complement your SAP ERP regardless of what your ERP environment looks like. It could be 10 different ERPs. It could be a single instance of S/4HANA. It really doesn't matter. The use cases and value that these solutions bring are what they are in every sort of one of those ERP landscapes. And so by addressing these manual processes that feed the ERP, you really are doing no regret work. These aren't solutions that need to be re-implemented or use cases that become shelfware or irrelevant after you move to S4, for example. And so again, with that catcher's mitt theory in mind, it is a no regret approach to address that core, that foundation first. It will only benefit, especially with the manageable scope that we talked about, it will only benefit those downstream transformation initiatives. So continuing on the conversation, one thing that was mentioned earlier that I think we can revisit here is this idea of needing to provide timely insights and enhance real-time visibility. And I think as we think about resilience and agility, the theme of today's webinar, this is probably one of the most important sort of outcomes that organizations are looking for as they're thinking about being agile and being resilient, sort of weathering the storm. They need good information and good data, and they need that information in a timely fashion to be able to pivot, to be able to scale, to be able to make adjustments and business decisions without having to wait until a quarter end reporting cycle, for example. And so as finance and accounting professionals, I think we can all agree that we're being asked for this data and this information, more frequently than ever. Again, we're not doing polling questions in today's session, but I would predict that if I asked everybody on today's event, how many of you have been asked to provide something sooner or been asked for a quick analysis or a piece of information from your manager, from your CFO, everybody would raise their hands and say yes. So one of the things that, we think about in terms of what you can do to, to drive resilience and agility for your business is to focus on being able to provide those insights more timely and to be able to complete some of these finance and accounting processes more real time. So what does that look like, right? So what are some examples of doing that? One of the things we hear all the time is companies have, balance sheet substantiation processes in place, but they maybe don't have the level of visibility throughout the month, or they don't spend time, or they don't have the resources or capacity to really analyze what makes up some of those balances, to dig into, transaction level information. And so one of the things we see companies doing very successfully, again, in a manageable scope, is matching open items, right? Taking a look at those aged open items on the balance sheet, analyzing those, being able to get information back to the business that is helpful, or gives them a higher degree of confidence in reported results. Being able to focus their time on high risk accounts without having to look for a needle in a haystack, so to speak, right? Or without using rainbow spreadsheets to identify items that require follow-up or might result in adjustments. Having, a proactive and controlled solution in place for your finance and accounting processes means that you get visibility sooner to those unusual items. And it also means many of those closing activities, whether that be, an accrual that needs to get recorded, or again, a detailed reconciliation that's going to result in an adjustment, or even a control that needs to get signed off. When you have a proactive, real-time approach that's pulling in information from your data sources on a regular basis and flagging them for you to allow you an exception-based approach, you're suddenly able to focus your resources' attention on what matters most. You're able to correct those items more quickly. And then specifically tied to this timely insights and visibility, you have dashboards, you have alerts, you have analyses, and you have, other controls documented, all in a place that you can access it from anywhere, where you can share information. And again, where this can be performed more real time, right? So you're not waiting for a specific day during the close period. You don't have these bottlenecks that are stopping and starting. And again, you have this much more proactive approach. I think one of the most inherently challenging things about traditional manual accounting processes is that they're just reactive, right? We wait until a certain day at the end of the month or after something happens before we dig in, or we get visibility to an issue, but we don't find that until consolidation, or we don't find that until the very end of our process. And all this is information that, had we known it sooner, could have impacted a business decision. So focusing on those insights, focusing on analysis, and doing that by automating a lot of these, again, mundane processes and focusing on high risk areas is going to allow greater confidence in decision making and more real-time decision making. Another customer example here to highlight as we think about agility, Brambles is another great customer here that shared that, because they're not waiting till the end of the month, right? They see what's happening throughout the close. They're finding ways to give back information to their organization, become a more agile finance organization, be able to shift and pivot. And again, that gets back to, freeing up those resources, making them more available for other work. So the last thing we wanted to talk about here is this concept of quick wins. So we talked a little bit about manageable scope, meaning the deployment of solutions like these Blackline solution extension does not have to be a big bang, entire platform, global approach where everything is done at once and your implementation takes years to complete, right? Manageable scope is an important part of, finding opportunities to drive value during this time of disruption where you maybe don't have extra resources or you don't have a tremendous amount of budget allotted. But speed is also important here, right? So thinking about quick wins. We talked about being able to deploy rapidly, but it's not just about the implementation time. It's about how quickly you can get value back to your organization. And I think Catherine will share a bit more later on some of the really measurable outcomes that we've seen our customers drive and deliver across various different sort of categories or outcomes that our customers are looking for. But speed to value is really important here, right? If you're going to invest in a technology solution with the limited amount of funding or budget you have during these economic times, you need to have a high degree of confidence that you're going to get the value back and that you're going to see that return on your investment quickly. And so not only can these solutions be deployed in pieces, in chunks, one use case at a time, but they can be deployed rapidly. As we talked about before, it builds a solid foundation for broader transformation, and it sets the stage for future use cases. But we consistently also see, all of these deployments and these use cases return their value really quickly. In this case, we've called out an average of an 8-month payback period. Pretty impressive. So inside of 1 year, our customers are getting value. And again, back to the momentum, when you get those quick wins, those feed future results. And those quick wins are no regret work. So you're going to continue to build on them as you go forward, right? Maybe you're starting with visibility, getting those insights, providing information, doing analyses, and then you move on to more complex deployments, addressing processes like, all of your global journal entries, automating those, freeing up that manual work. You can choose what journey makes the most sense for you, and you'll do that based on your understanding of your processes and what that low-hanging fruit looks like. So just to highlight one more customer example before I turn it back over to you, Catherine. Aetna is another customer that I've worked with and followed along as they've been on a multi-year journey with BlackLine and also with their ERP providers. And what they have done is they've established this center of excellence approach. They've taken the work that was previously done by hundreds of people and they've centralized it. And this work is specific to many of their financial close processes. They've centralized it with a center of excellence, and they've deployed BlackLine to really implement best practices, leading practices for one process at a time. And so they have this great approach of finding a problem, identifying a challenge, getting the ideas and the leading practices to address that specific challenge or use case. And then, they put that into place in action by using BlackLine to deploy a lot of those leading practices. And as you see there at the very end of this thought from Aetna, they're able to celebrate each of those incremental wins along the way. And that's built a lot of momentum, a lot of buy-in, and of course, a tremendous amount of efficiency and value for them as they've been able to redeploy many of their resources as they centralize this work to a small group of people in their center of excellence. So a really fun story that I've enjoyed following. With that, that's kind of the midsection here, the practical advice about building resilience and agility. So I'll turn it back over to you, Catherine, if you want to add anything and to share some additional benefits.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. So I think the only thing that I wanted to add on some of those last two practical tips is that, as you think about your accounting and finance organization and kind of implementing change and, the idea of automation, you might be met with some resistance or hesitance. And, I'd certainly experienced that when I was working in corporate accounting. You might say, this is the new way we're going to approach something. And people are like, well, this is too complicated, or this won't work because of X, Y, and Z. And I think accountants are very hesitant to embrace change sometimes because they know the cost of getting it wrong, right? They know that the cost of compliance is really high and it's really important. So I think one of the ways to kind of overcome that is exactly what Molly said, is drive those quick wins. So you don't necessarily need to go with this, transformation that's going to completely change the way everybody works on day one, but start showing them the value of an automation solution and take it one use case at a time and really get that buy-in. And I think then people's ideas, they start to build and people start to get a little bit more engaged and they see what it can do. And then they get really excited about it. And then it turns from kind of this, here's the way we're going to approach this change, to people really doing a bottoms up build of here are all the things that I'd like to change. And so I think it also goes back to that kind of talent issue that we were talking about. When people are engaged and they're motivated about the work that they're doing, it's better for everybody. It's better for your employees. It's good for talent retention, but also it benefits the organization as a whole. So I think the way to get there in a lot of cases is to drive those quick wins and just build one use case at a time. So now we can move on to just reviewing some benefits and impactful results. I know Molly trying to talk to you through some customer examples, but we have some quantitative metrics that we'd like to share and really just helping you kind of understand the value that automation solutions like SAP Solution Extensions by BlackLine can bring to your finance and accounting organization. So we've talked a lot about kind of speed and time to insight and just reducing time spent in the close. And so we've seen customers who are running BlackLine solutions achieve up to 70% reduction in days to close. And that's really significant if you think about, like Molly mentioned before, people saying, can you get me this information faster? Can you get it to me sooner? In helping to support that. Another, big, meaningful kind of impact that accounting automation solution can have is just less time spent on manual work. And we've kind of touched on this, but up to 50% less time spent on manual work is pretty significant. And you can redeploy that time and redeploy that capacity to more value-added work. The other kind of notable topic is scalability, right? We haven't really touched on scalability too much, but in the context of resiliency and agility and thinking about, how to take on some of this incremental work that's coming along with the disruption, along with the changes, without adding more headcount or having more bodies associated with helping to solve the challenge. BlackLine solutions can help increase the amount of work performed without adding headcount. So it can really help your organization scale in a time when you might not have the budget or the resources to add new headcount. And then in terms of value, we've seen, according to a study done by IDC, we've seen that accounting and finance organizations are returning their investment with just an 8-month payback period. So Molly kind of touched on this before, but that's pretty impressive that organizations are able to make an investment and see a return within the same year. And last but not least, wanted to highlight a 474% 3-year return on investment, which is pretty incredible. And so last but not least, we just wanted to highlight this customer quote that came out of an IDC business value study that was done. So it says that this organization noted that their team feels more engaged and they feel like they're doing value added work because there's automation. There's 95% of their account reconciliation happens automatically versus being done manually. So people are very engaged, engagement is high, and they feel like their contribution is really beneficial to the company. They're not just checking boxes. And so I think this kind of summarizes everything that we've talked about very nicely in the sense that it talks about how there's automation and that automation is driving teams to feel more engaged and not only that, but contribute to the company. And so I think that really kind of circles back and summarizes nicely to the themes of resiliency and agility and focusing on kind of addressing some of those top challenges that we talked about at the beginning. So with that, it kind of concludes today's prepared remarks, but I'd like to hand it back over to our host, Jessica, for any Q&A.
Thank you so much, Catherine and Molly. That was great. There are so many great insights and data points and all of the proof points that you need that companies are looking for, especially given today's economic environment that we're navigating, both today and tomorrow, really. So I think that we actually have time to address a few questions that came in through the chat during the session. And again, feel free to keep putting them in there. We do capture all the questions, so anything we're not able to get to live, we will report back as soon as we have a fuller answer for you. So the first question that I have here says, my organization is making a lot of other changes. How did you balance a financial close optimization project with other major initiatives going on?
I could take that one, and it's a great question. Another one that I think we hear constantly and really reemphasizes this theme that you all and we all in finance and accounting are being asked to do a lot of different things, pulled in a lot of different directions. I think I would come back to sort of the manageable scope part that we discussed here. I think we can agree as we think about the need for building resilience and agility that sort of waiting to address these manual processes is not an option that's going to create any resilience and agility. In fact, it has the opposite effect where, it's only going to further burden your people the longer you wait to address some of these manual issues. So what I would suggest there is find, again, 1 or 2 use cases, find your low-hanging fruit, identify those specific challenges that you can address, again, without an army of people. And when you do that, when you tackle that first use case, not only have you, proven the value of a solution, gotten your feet wet and started along your accounting optimization journey, but you've done no regret work that you're going to continue to build on later. So I see many of our customers, picking a specific issue. Maybe it's bank reconciliations are particularly painful, and they address a specific type of reconciliation rather than saying, I'm going to, optimize every reconciliation I have across the organization. That could be overwhelming. You could get some of that pushback that Catherine mentioned. And so find your champions, find your low-hanging fruit, and start there. You'll be surprised pleasantly, I think, with how much excitement, how much you have to celebrate in a matter of weeks that, again, will only feed those future use cases. So start small, do something. Again, move things forward, find that next executable step, because waiting really is not a viable option.
Thank you so much, Molly. Another question that came in is, what does it take to maintain financial close automation technology? And how much IT and business involvement is required in maintenance?
Yeah, I can take this one. So the Blackline solutions are pretty much business owned. And especially in my experience and in most other companies that we've worked with, somebody in accounting and finance is the administrator for the solution. So there's really not that much dependency on IT aside from, helping to set up some of the data flows when you're doing the implementation. So it's very nice. It's business owned. There's very little kind of maintenance that's needed. And it's really managed exactly within accounting and finance. Molly, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add regarding kind of the IT configuration and how the data flows upon the setup.
No, yeah, that's great. I think your answer was exactly right in terms of the maintenance question. Another question we see commonly is around sort of implementation and sort of how much IT work is involved up front in getting these solutions deployed. Because again, a common challenge that we hear from our customers is our IT team is completely at capacity, right? They're working on other deployments, other implementations. And even though we have buy-in from finance and accounting, we can't get an IT resource to do this. And so what I would add there is that even in the initial phases in deployment, the IT resources needed, to deploy these solutions are very minimal, right? There's not a lot of IT time required. And a lot of that is because we have these pre-built connectors, right? That are, again, premium qualified connectors that help data flow seamlessly and in an automated fashion between your SAP ERP and between your Blackline cloud solutions. And so whether you're, bringing in GL account balances or transactional detail from your SAP ERP, that's done through this SAP connector that is pre-built, doesn't require, new, custom code or significant work from your IT department. It really just needs to be installed and deployed. I think when I first deployed the Blackline solutions, we used one IT resources for less than a week of time to help us get this done. And it was really pretty seamless. Even the more complex use cases, like, we have customers that manage their entire journal entry process and are automating, 90+% of their journal entries, and all of that work starts in Blackline. There is a web services pre-built SAP connector that posts those entries back to SAP in real time. And again, very low level of effort to deploy these connectors because they are pre-built. So I think that's all I wanted to add, probably more than the person asking this question wanted to know, but hopefully helpful, as I've seen a few other implementation questions pop up in the chat.
Thank you very much, Molly. Okay, so that concludes the time that we have to answer live questions. Unfortunately, we're running out of time here, but like I said, please go ahead and continue to submit. We'll follow up after the webcast. And like we said initially in the beginning, feel free to leverage all of the resources that we do have on the platform for you. And if you're looking for even more information, please visit blackline.com/SAP. And again, thank you so much to Catherine and Molly, and thank you so much to all of you for attending today's session.